Hello and welcome to Wine Blast with me, Susie Barry, and my husband and fellow master of wine, Peter Richards. Now, I think it's fair to say that we are notoriously thirsty people. But for this show, it helps to be hungry too, doesn't it?
It does. Though I think the last time I was actually hungry was about 2 weeks ago, given the epic levels of research that we've been doing.
Which is, research which has essentially involved a lot of eating and drinking.
Yeah, mainly. But still, I mean, I think to the extent that I need to go on one of those boot camps that you were recommending, you were touting in last week's episode.
It has been pretty full on, hasn't it? But our aim is definitely to whet everyone's appetite, because in this show we've got not only some sensational food and wine, we've also got some pretty tasty content too.
I think it's the most exciting wine regions in the world. This is a region that produces every style of wine. You will find a wine here that you'll enjoy. The thing is, you may not know that it exists. And the wines have so much character and personality. They have soul, I think is the way I would describe it. There's just something about them that kind of hits you.
So, a discovery, adventure, and a nice bit of grub. What's not to like? Welcome to the Sud de France, or Occitanie, the sun-kissed south of France, where a sea of vines spills over mountains and coastal plains in a land of hearty food, big characters, and attention-grabbing wine, I think it's fair to say. We just heard from fellow Master of Wine and Sud de France expert Matthew Stubbs there. We'll also be hearing from producers Jean-Claude Masse and Pauline Nadal about all this and more.
Can't wait. But we are going to be doing something a little bit different for this show. It's midwinter in the UK right now, and pretty bleak at that. So we're all in need of a morale boost. And we thought, what better way to do that than by cooking up a heartwarming feast to match the wines to, and structure the show around that.
It's basically just an excuse for us to pig out and call it work.
You are giving away our trade
Let's
secrets
be honest.
now.
Let's level here.
No, but I mean, but the south of France is known for its gastronomy and amazing ingredients. And I have to say, my first thought when we started talking about doing this show was, can we get food involved?
That's your first thought when you think about anything, isn't it?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
But,
but particularly in this case.
No, which is fair enough. To explain, our utterly respectable plan, just so we're clear about that, is to do 6 dishes, all of which are inspired by a classic southern French ingredient, like mushrooms, duck, shellfish, Toulouse sausages. We've got in there ratatouille, Roquefort.
Yeah.
Sounds so much better when you say it. But then there's we've given them a mainstream twist, courtesy of your chefy expertise, I think would be the way of saying it.
I'm not sure if that's a compliment or you're just taking the mickey, but
But
I'll go with it. So yes.
Entirely.
We've got. So what have we got? We've got mushroom arancini. We've got cod with beurre blanc and winter ratatouille. We've got a Mediterranean shellfish stew, a Toulouse sausage casserole, a duck shepherd's pie, and then finally Roquefort cheese, which we can't really call exactly a dish, but it sort of is a dish in
just
itself,
straight
isn't
up.
it?
Why not? Don't mess around.
It's a meal.
It's
meal
a
in
very,
itself.
very nice menu, that from start to finish. We should also say big thanks to the Occitanie region for sponsoring this episode. They've allowed us to pick our personal highlights from their annual Top 100 competition. So already a very fine selection of wines from the region. And we then road tested them extensively with these dishes. I told you this was hard work, to come up with the very finest pairings. And boy, what a lineup it is.
It is sumptuous. No other word for it.
Yeah.
And just to recap, this episode does follow on neatly from the one we did recently on AOP Languedoc, where we not only heard from regional experts and growers, but we also said quite explicitly these wines work best with food. So this is our promised follow-up to that.
It is. I think I remember one wine grower was talking about his mum's ratatouille in that one, wasn't he?
Not sure I can compete with that.
No, don't even
We'll
go
do our
there.
best, won't we? We'll do our best.
Something.
We'll do our best.
But we can't beat
We're not going to compete
the
with
ratatouille de maman.
Maman's ratatouille. And anyway, let's just say we are big fans of the wines from this region.
Yeah.
Just last weekend, we opened a bottle of Grange des Pères 2015, which is IGP Pays d'Hérault, and it was, what was it? It was stunning. So rugged and intense, but also really perfumed and just intriguing.
Hard to sum up, really, but just, oh my word, and we've been lucky enough to have a fair few bottles, I have to say, from the mid-90s and from the legendary Domaine du Domas Gassac in the past few years. Again, a sort of characterful but refined and just sort of captivating red, really. The kind of wine that sort of sucks you in like a black hole with its irresistible gravitational pull.
There are quite a few of these top wines in the south of France now, isn't there? Aren't there? And let's also not forget we just had a Roussillon red as one of our wines of the year in our previous episode, albeit with a unique twist. You'll have to listen to that one if you haven't already to find out more. But I think it's fair to say we are big fans of this place and its wines. And food. Yeah,
so we should probably define exactly what this place is before we start rabbiting on about the gastronomy and whatnot. So Occitanie is an official designation covering what is apparently the world's largest vineyard, comprising bits of the western Rhone, the Languedoc, Roussillon, and most of southwest France outside sort of Bordeaux and Bergerac, those sort of
things. So this is a huge area, isn't it? Covering around 250,000 hectares of vines, which represent about a third of all French wine output and around 5% of global wine production.
That's a lot.
It is. It's really huge, isn't it? Within Occitanie, wine is one of the main sources of employment, with around 14,000 growers and a turnover in the region of 1.6 billion euros.
Now, we're not going to get too bogged down in stats, but there are three things this region is big on, which grabbed my attention reading around it. Firstly, it's big on organics, with about a quarter of the vineyard either certified organic or in conversion as of 2022. That's the biggest share in France, and it's growing every year. It's also big on rosé, making about 12% of worldwide rosé production. That is not to be sniffed at.
Making me think love your rosé, don't you?
Quiche already. And finally, it's big on exports. It accounts for about a third of total French wine exports by volume, worth over €1 billion. So we see a lot of this stuff around the world too.
I thought you said you weren't going to go big on stats there. And rosé, you can't help it, can you?
I always go big on rosé.
and stats.
Probably in that order.
But in terms of general context, this region has a long wine history, from the Greeks and Romans to huge volume production in the 19th and 20th centuries, and then more recently, a big reduction in the vineyard due to vine pull incentives. Just lately, there's been a growing focus on quality, innovation, and in some quarters, reviving old traditions to excellent effect.
Absolutely. That's really, really exciting one. Now, we're talking generalities here, and it might be good just to mention a few specific names to help sort of anchor this a little bit. So Languedoc is by far the biggest region within Occitanie. It makes a lot of IGP wines, Van de Pey, as were, often international varieties like Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Viognier, that sort of thing, sold under the Pays d'Oc appellation or similar. But you've also got AOC wines at the top of the tree, like Limoux, Saint-Chinian, Corbière, Minervois, La Clappe, Pic Saint-Loup, Terrasse du Larzac. I see, incidentally, that Grès de Montpellier has just been awarded full appellation status too. Which is really interesting. Some of these we'll come on to in a bit when we get stuck into the food.
Oh, don't tempt me. But then we've also got the beautiful Roussillon region down towards the Pyrenees and Spain on the Mediterranean coast, which is essentially an east-facing amphitheatre, a region of steep hillsides, baking sun and fierce winds, of old vines and pretty brave winemakers, not to mention some incredible wines in all styles, from haunting whites to hearty reds, and then the powerful Vin du Naturel, which are fortified wines made in all kinds of styles. You might be familiar with the names Rivesaltes, Maury, Collioure, Totavel, or IGP Côte Catalan. All these are from Roussillon.
And then finally, we have the intriguing wines of southwest France. Again, an area with a long history, but a bit more off the beaten track than the Mediterranean parts, I think it's fair to say. So this region is what lies south and east of Bordeaux. a region that's proud of its food as well as its wines.
The inspiration for our duck shepherd's pie.
Indeed, the duck, is a speciality in the region, goose, other things like that. You've got a bit more Atlantic influence here, and it's home to an incredible number of indigenous grape varieties. The big names include Cahors region for its serious Malbec, Madiran for the Tannat, Jurançon, with its sort of tangy, dry whites, which can be amazing, and beautiful sweet wines made from Gros Manseng and Petit Manseng.
Yeah, we actually featured a Marciac, didn't we, on our 6 Best Wine Books episode, which is from this part of the world and made from the Fer Cervadou grape, also known locally as Bracol, and we've got one of those coming up, haven't we? You've also got Fronton, based on the Negrette grape, so a land of unique grapes and wines, as you said, and of course you've got also the bigger volume production like IGP Côte de Gascogne for good value whites, and we had one of those on our Wines of the Year listing.
Yeah, now I think I read somewhere that there are something like 300 grape varieties in southwest France, 120 of which are indigenous.
Wow.
So,
That's a lot, isn't it?
Lots to discover, I think.
You're not kidding.
In fact, lots to discover all over the south of France. And this was a point Matthew Stubbs made when we asked him what the wines from this area offer us wine lovers.
I think in a nutshell, everything, because this is a region that produces every style of wine. So whether you're a consumer of sparkling, white, rosé, red, sweet, fortified, you'll find a wine here that you'll enjoy. The thing is, you may not know that it exists. So that's just a question of how do we make that discovered?
And Matthew knows his onions. He's not only a master of wine, but he lived in the south of France for 12 years. He has the Vinécole Wine School there and is a brilliant educator and communicator.
Talking of onions, can we tuck into our starter?
Why not? Why not? I thought you'd never ask. Okay, so we have got mushroom arancini, essentially wild mushroom risotto balls stuffed with a little bit of buffalo mozzarella, then covered in breadcrumbs. Panko breadcrumbs are kind of best, and deep fried, and then served with a truffle mustard mayonnaise. These are to die for. Very flavoursome, very filling, and they're also very wine friendly.
So the ultimate, really.
The ultimate.
Yeah.
So what have we got?
So what worked really well here was a sparkling wine, a Crémant de Limoux, the Sieur d'Arc Blason Rouge Brut NV. Now, not many people know that you can get really good fizz from the Languedoc in a range of styles, but Limoux is actually one of, if not the most historic sparkling wine producing centres in the world, and this one works really well. Doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a blend of Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc, and the local Mozac grape. It's made like champagne in the traditional method, so it's biscuity and bready, as well as having some ripe apple fruit, and that combination of flavours and also structure is what helps it go really well with the rich mushroomy flavours of the arancini.
Totally.
It's also got a rather bizarre touchy-feely label, hasn't it?
Yes.
Sort of a bit like velour.
Tactile. It's a velour.
Sort of a red velour
so
label.
If you stroke the velour while having the wine, it's all very strange, but wonderful. Anyway, it is, anyway. But, you can, stroking or non-stroking, you can have this as an aperitif.
Yeah.
But it can also work with canapés or hors d'oeuvre. Like, is this an hors d'oeuvre? Do we classify this as an hors d'oeuvre? It could be a starter, really.
It's a ball.
Could be anything.
It's
anyway,
literally a ball.
It's a tasty
It's a crunchy ball. Sorry.
I'm just going to have to focus on the wine. Just keep it together. Focus on the wine. It is very good value.
It is good value.
We just say that under 20 quid for a really good traditional method fizz. I think it's really nice. And I think that's probably quite typical of Crémant, isn't it? Crémant, which is the term for French sparkling wine made like champagne, but not in the Champagne region. And it's a category on a bit of a roll at the moment. Isn't it? I think,
I mean,
really
it can.
value.
The best ones can offer great value.
Yeah.
Great value.
And Limoux is doing really well as well right now. Not just with its Crémant, but also the historic Blanquette and Méthode Ancestrale styles, which tend to be sort of fruitier and earthier and made entirely from Mozac.
Yeah. Now, we had two other options, didn't we, with the arancini? And one was a value shout, the Villa Blanche Terret Blanc 2022 IGP Côte de Tau. This is $9.49 at Waitrose. And Terret is a local grape variety, one of those indigenous ones we were talking about. And it makes for a really clean and fresh pairing, doesn't it? And then the other option was the gorgeous Roc des Anges Lume 22. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, but I certainly know that I like it. 2022, which is an IGP Côte Catalane from Roussillon, and it's got a touch of rich nuttiness, but it's also textured and very refreshing and just so seamless with the arancini, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It's in that sort
Beautiful
of classic
wine.
style of really good Roussillon whites, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, you know, almost like the Le Soula Blanc, which we featured on the pod before and which we love. Not shouty, but elegant and mineral and textured, as you say, on the palate. They just work so well with food. And we actually tried this Roc des Anges with quite a lot of these dishes, didn't we? And it sort of worked with everything.
It really did. Yeah, so good. Now, I think at this point we should bring in Jean-Claude Masse, founder and owner of Domaine, or Les Domaines Paul Masse, one of the best-known wine operations in the south of France. He's been described as a pioneer of new wave French wine, and he's certainly not afraid to rattle a few cages. One of his brands is Arrogant Frog. His motto is, and I quote, "Old world wine with new world attitude." And we asked him why Sud de France wines work well with food.
No, they work well with food because, first of all, they are outstanding value for money wine. And that's the key, basically, to the food and wine pairing. It's a game. You never know. And obviously, wine that are not so expensive, you can play and find the one that suit your food. The second aspect, obviously, we're Mediterranean climate, and we're wines that have got a good, that are quite savory. They are, as we say in France, gourmand, and they are very palatable immediately. You know, you don't have to think, should I wait? They are palatable even when they're young, and because they are made in a very simple way, most of the time as a craft. So this is why I always say that when it comes to food and wine pairing, you have a good playground that you can enjoy easily.
So savoury wines that are good to experiment with, to have fun with. What are your favourite food and wine matches from the south of France, from that area?
Okay. So south of France, if we talk about seafood, we have red tuna and an oak age Grenache Blanc, or mixed Grenache Blanc, Grenache Gris, with tartare of tuna is outstanding. And then you can go for a Viognier, for example, for grilled monkfish, for example, because we have a bit of monkfish here. Then we have lamb with herbs is a classic. So with a Mourvèdre, with a Syrah, with a Grenache Syrah, with a GSM from the Languedoc, it works perfectly. We have a lot of goat cheese. So goat cheese you can enjoy an oak Chardonnay. You know, we do stews here with beef or veal and with vegetable, because we are a region where vegetables are very, very good. And you can use a Cabernet Sauvignon, ripe Cabernet Sauvignon, because our Cabernet Sauvignon can easily ripen here. Sparkling wine, I love Blanquette with oysters, beside Picpoul, obviously, which is a good wine for oysters. Oysters is second, it's a shellfish, the shellfish of the region. I'm a chocolate lover. You can do a beautiful chocolate cake with either, if you go the very sweet way, with Rivesaltes or Grenat, but you can also use a still wine from the Perpignan, from the Côte du Roussillon area. They are this wine have got a fig character, like a dry fig character. So there are plenty of pairings that you can do with the diversity of food that we have.
No shortage of options there. I mean, usually it's just one or two things when you ask that question, isn't it? But I suppose maybe this speaks of the diversity of the wines as well as the food in the region.
Yeah, exactly. He did talk about the diversity of Languedoc-Roussillon, and partly because of its long history, but also because of more modern practices which he does, like blending, for example. Even with unconventional grapes like Riesling and Gewürztraminer, or even things like the fungal resistant Peewee hybrids. He works with something like 46 different grape varieties, and he said at one point that he'd like the age of single varietals to be over, which and that we should celebrate blends more, which I thought was a really interesting angle. I
mean, he's quite a winemaker, isn't he? And not afraid to challenge the status quo. Quite a live wire mind, an original thinker, which is really good for the region.
Yeah. I mean, he's doing all kinds of stuff. He's making low sulfite wine. He's going increasingly organic. He's reviving old traditions like using manure, not fertilizer, because apparently it helps water retention in the soil, which is critical at the moment, and there's lots of drought in the region. He's going big on wine tourism and gastronomy to try to improve the region's image and thus the selling price of the wines. He's trying to make the best Cabernet in the world, in his words, with his Astelia label. Punchy. He's pushing the boundaries in many, many ways, and I agree. That's really positive.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't think it's atypical of a certain mentality or ambition in this part of the wine world, from my experience. And we have plenty more positive spirit and ambition coming up as we tuck into our main courses, finding lots more tasty wines to match to them, and hearing much more about this fascinating part of the world. By way of brief summary, Occitanie is a huge wine region in southern France with tremendous diversity of styles, grape varieties, terroirs and producers. The wines don't tend to lack for character and often are at their best with food. So far, we've found a couple of brilliant matches for mushroom arancini, and now we're on to the seafood.
Yeah, seafood is a big part of the local gastronomy, particularly in Languedoc-Roussillon, given it's so close to the Mediterranean. And there's no shortage of wines to go with it. So first up, we've got our Mediterranean shellfish stew. I have to say that quite carefully. Stew. Do you want to tell us how it's made?
Yeah, but I mean, essentially, it's a tomato-based stew made with garlic, onion, pepper, oregano, and then this little vinegar and sugar reduction, which I love because it just gives that hint of sweetness, and that really works well because then you've got the earthy mussels and prawns, there's some cod in there, and then all served with a nice big slab of garlicky toasted sourdough bread. So you've got these tangy tomato flavours, garlic and seafood. It's all quite gutsy. So you need something that's got a bit of oomph to wash it down, or also something that's not, however, going to overpower the fish and the shellfish.
That all sounds very logical.
Over to you.
I'm just gazing at the wine, which is
can you possibly offer me?
By far the best wine to carry that off was a rosé, the Chateau Estanie Valangue 2022 from Fougères. This wine was really impressive when we tasted it, wasn't it? It wasn't just a bland identikit, pale, restrained pink. This had texture and density and sort of roasted herb character. And it stood up perfectly to the stew.
Oh, it was brilliant with it, really good. Perfect match.
Fougères, just while we're on it, is an appellation in the foothills of the Cevennes Mountains, north of Béziers. It's known for its sort of schist soils, again, one to say carefully, and sort of just fresh, elegant wines, isn't it? Which are mainly red, but there is a bit of rosé and white too. And obviously on the base of this rosé, pretty good.
Another option is to go down the refreshing and cleansing route. In that sense, the Laurent Miquel Albarino La Grasse 2022 IGP Ode worked really well. It's clean and crisp, as you'd expect of this variety, and it's a variety you normally find in northwest Spain, but can work pretty well in the south of France. Plus, it's good value, currently on offer, actually, at £10.50 in Sainsbury's. But even at its usual sort of price of, I think it's £12.50, it's a lot of wine.
Yeah, value for money wine here, as Jean-Claude was saying. Now, we did hear from Jean-Claude about food and wine matching, but I'd also like to bring in Matthew Stubbs too on this subject, because he had some really interesting things to say on why these are foodie wines.
Well, I think obviously the variety helps. We've got so many different wines in this region that can help. I think also the abundance of such a wide variety of food. I mean, obviously the region is dominated by the Mediterranean, so seafood, shellfish is a huge, part of people's diet, and also a massive industry. I mean, oysters, everywhere. I mean, drinking a glass of Picpoul overlooking the Édon de Taux with a plateau de fruits de mer is a fantastic thing. So seafood plays a huge part. So a lot of fish, obviously, things like dorade, sea bream, sea bass, monkfish, even swordfish, things like that you'll find quite readily. And then obviously there's a huge amount for the meat eaters. There's all sorts to help there as well. Every type. They love a grillade in the Languedoc-Roussillon outside, barbecuing. It's very popular. If you're into wild boar, then it's difficult to find in a shop, but you'll always find some in a village who can get you some. So particularly some member of the hunting fraternity. So there's that around. And if those for non-meat eaters or non-fish eaters, there's a huge range of fantastic fruit, fantastic vegetables. What else? Wild asparagus, wild garlic, mushrooms. People won't tell you where they are, but you can find some great sets at the right time of year. So dessert or cheese, you need the vin du naturel, because this is a region where it all started, where fortified wine began. And I know it's a category that's kind of fallen out of favor, but there are some fantastic fortified wines here. If you want to drink a different fortified wine from the normal selection, particularly one with lower alcohol, because we're talking at wines at 15-16%. This at the end of a meal, when you've had champagne and white wine and red wine and maybe a sweet wine, then you come to the cheese and you want to drink port. Maybe a Rivesaltes or Maury or Bagnols could be a very good option. Yeah.
More food for thought there. Some points we've already touched on. Others we're going to pick up on in due course, particularly regarding the fortified vin du naturel. Yeah. In the meantime, just so you know, the Étang de Taux is a huge sort of lagoon on the Mediterranean coast near the Picpoul de Pinet region. So I can see what Matthew suggests being really quite delightful.
Yes.
And can I also just apologise at this point for not cooking any wild boar?
You may.
You're not going to forgive me, no, but I can apologise.
As a committed Asterix fan, I am devastated, of course. But I'm just going to try and hold it together for the sake of the pod. But I'm crying inside.
I'm so sorry.
No, as Matthew says, seafood and fish play a big part in the cuisine, and we've got another dish along these lines now, and I'm not complaining about any of this, just to be clear. Cod with a beurre blanc sauce and winter ratatouille.
It's hardly ratatouille for any purists, but this is a take on a dish we once cooked on Saturday Kitchen, wasn't it?
We didn't cook it on Saturday Kitchen. I think we cooked it in preparation.
For Saturday Kitchen. It was cooked by the wonderful chef Galton Blackiston. Thank goodness, not us.
Yes.
But what you've got is this rich, buttery but zesty, lemony beurre blanc sauce with a nice chunky piece of cod, and then an earthy winter ratatouille, which is basically little cubes of beetroot, parsnip, carrot, swede, and then all roasted with oil and garlic. And it's really flavoursome and sort of comforting, isn't it?
Yeah. And with this dish, we had an absolutely stunning wine match, which is the Picpoul de Pinet Sélection 2020 from Les Vignerons de Florensac. Now, this is not your average Picpoul, is it?
No.
So we need to tell the story.
I'll tell the story.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but at this moment, I think we need to make a confession. The shame. We've actually been aware of Picpoul de Pinet for quite a while. Thank goodness. It actually was only made an official appellation in 2013, to be fair. And we've recommended a fair bit of it in that time because it tends to be an amazing value white that you can find in most places. Yeah. It's crisp, it's versatile, so it works well with lots of different types of food. But we had no idea they'd come up with a new category. Patience, for age-worthy, richer styles of Picpoul, which are put into brown, not green bottles. And that's what this wine is.
Yeah, they need to be patient with us. Our lack of knowledge about patience. It's a fair cop. But we did find out the fun way.
We did.
Which is basically through this wine. So, Picpoul is definitely having a moment right now, isn't it? It's gone wildly popular. Most Picpoul, as you say, is fresh and upbeat. The grape variety Picpoul translates as lip stinger from Occitan, the Occitan language, which is really quite pleasing. But now they've introduced the Patience designation for those wines that are more intense and complex and food friendly. Not actually wines that have been oak aged. Interestingly, they specifically don't want that. They just want a wine that's kind of complex and age worthy.
Anyway, here's what Matthew had to say about all this.
I mean, I suppose the biggest success story, from an AOC perspective in the Languedoc has been Picpoul de Pinet. I mean, you think 15 years ago, I remember when I was buying wine in the supermarket, nobody ever heard of Picpoul de Pinet, 15, 20 years ago. Now it's everywhere. Every supermarket stocks it. It's on a lot of house wine lists. It's the biggest success story probably of the Languedoc in the last 20 years.
And what do you think, just thinking about Picpoul de Pinet, of the Patience new designation?
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of it. I think because when I look at the numbers for Picpoul, I think, okay, this is a high acid grape variety. Yeah, it's actually not that aromatic. But why should it not be able to age? This is a wine that retains its acidity in a warm climate. And so the Patience project, for those that don't know, is really trying to see how these wines age. And the results that I've tried, and I've tried quite a few. It's only about I think there's maybe 10 producers now that are now authorized or making the Patience. And the ones I've tried have been really impressive. Wines going back to 2018, 2016 even. So these wines can age. They're not the same profile as as a young Picpoul. They're very sort of saline, bright and breezy style, but they have a more of a sort of a leesy character. It's kind of almost like sort of a citrus peel character to them, but which I find quite attractive.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? If Picpoul is all about freshness, sort of easygoing drinking, is it then a good idea to introduce or encourage a style that is effectively the opposite of that?
Oh, but the wines taste really good,
Yeah.
And you can't argue with that. And Matthew's calling Picpoul the biggest success story of Languedoc in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably room for this new category.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Interesting in that sense that it's a white wine that's been a big success story, isn't it?
In the south of France.
Exactly. Yeah. It does seem that whites and rosés are looking like stars of the future here, and they've been slightly overlooked in the past, maybe. And it may seem odd, in a warm region, but I guess if you grow the right grapes, cultivate them properly, harvest early, it can work.
Yeah. And just actually one last word on whites. There was another wine, wasn't there, that went well with the cod. It was the Masbecher Hypnosis 313 2021, which is an oak-aged Grenache Blanc from Côte de Roussillon. It's generous and creamy, so it worked really nicely with the flavours of the dish, in the same way that the honeyed, yeasty richness and fresh acidity of the Picpoul tied in so beautifully too.
Yeah, two really good matches there.
Yeah.
But time to move on to some sausage casserole, which I'm wanting to say all pod, which is pretty much as you'd imagine it. Sausages, beans, tomato sauce, also with a nice herby crust. That's my cooking summary.
It was brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.
Couldn't have put it better
that's
myself.
That's why I don't cook. And there were a few wines that worked really well here, weren't they? All reds.
Yeah. And the Chateau d'Escabe Braucol 2022 from Gaillac in southwest France had a really nice sort of rustic feel that tied in very well here. If you remember, that's the Vers-Servadou grape.
Yeah.
I also love the Domaine de la Borie Blanche Terroir d'Altitude 2021 from Minervois-la-Lavinière. Now, this is one of my favourite appellations in Languedoc. The wines can be so perfumed and cultured and savoury. And this is a blend of Syrah, Grenache and Mourvèdre, which is elegant and polished and really seamless with the dish.
Yeah. But I think our favourite or the most impressive match was a Carignan from the winningly named IGP Côte du Brian. It's a very naughty wine.
It makes me laugh.
Very naughty wine. And it was I should say that properly. It's the IGP Côte du Briand, which sounds
more
better.
French.
It sounds more French, and it was the Calmel and Joseph Le Terroir La Fabrique 2021. It's a really intense, vivid, juicy, spicy red that's unapologetically wild, and it just blew us away with this sausage casserole, didn't it? It was amazing.
This just really remembers me. I'm not sure I've ever told you about that menu that I saw on a beach when I was in Thailand, which made me hoot because it had on it, I don't think they could spell, so it was fried Brians. Anyway, that's probably a story for another day, really. And
This is the image.
This combination that we have here was definitely better than a plate of fried brines. Anyway,
or fried brains,
to be serious,
whichever it was.
To be serious for a second about all this, we do love good Carignan, don't we?
Yes.
Which is often made from low-yielding old vines. And we spoke to Pauline Nadal from Domaine Nadal et No, a Roussillon estate that has, amongst other things, 4 hectares of very old Carignan vines. And I asked her to tell us about that.
So the Carignan is the grandmother of our vines. It was planted in 1900, straight after phylloxera. It was planted for the marriage, for the wedding of my great-grandmother, Thérèse Hainaut, with François Nadal. So it's like a celebration vines, and it's something it's a vine that we always wanted to keep. Carignan was all around Roussillon. Like you would find, in that time, Carignan everywhere. And it produced a lot of, it's very juicy. It produced a lot of juice, let's say. And so for that particular reason, a lot of people got rid of it because there was too much Carignan. So we wanted to keep it. I mean, my grandfather, because of that reason, kept it. My dad wanted to keep it. We have about 4 hectares left. It's very old. It's like crawling on the floor, but it's beautiful. We do everything by hand, obviously. Remove the grass, everything around every vines by hand. It's not planted the same way of the rest, like the rest of the vineyard. It's not on lines. We do like taille gobelet on this one. So it demands a lot of care. We like it because it makes incredible wine.
And but just describe the wine to me, the style that it produces in your glass. What would it be?
It's like it's quite powerful. It's like red stone. It's very warm, but red stone berries, black olive. Like it smells of the earth as well, like thyme, rosemary. It's quite leathery when you open it, but then this leathery taste, the smell goes away. When you leave it on the table, it would evolve throughout the dinner. It's beautiful.
It's so cool to see people championing their heritage, in such a brilliant way. It's often the case, isn't it, that a great variety will go through an unfashionable stage, but then come good, so the people who keep the faith come out on top, if you like. I think Sanso's a bit like that right now, coming into its own after being, hugely underappreciated in this part of the world for a long time.
I agree, yeah. And I suppose you could put Picpoul as a white in that category too.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's keep moving. We've got a duck shepherd's pie in the offing. Now, this is pretty much a classic shepherd's pie, but using slow-cooked duck legs instead of mince, and then adding in a few extra spices, some fresh orange, and plenty of red wine and port, and all topped off with a nice creamy mash. It is pure winter comfort food with just a hint of the southern French sun. And we found some really good wine matches for this, didn't we?
You can say that again, though we probably should have used Vin du Naturel instead of port, but maybe we're just being inclusive. Just we can spread the love. So one value option here was the Fontarèche Vieille Vigne 2022 from Corbière, which is just over a tenner. And it's just really nice, sort of classic Languedoc red, isn't it? Peppery, meaty, cherry fruit, elegantly bittersweet, and a nice sort of upbeat option with the dish. This is when we talk about these wines from Languedoc. They're just food friendly, even the basic ones. They've just got this lovely style and character which just sits really nicely with food. Matthew actually talked about the remoteness of the Corbière, where the region where this wine's from, which he calls the Wild West of the Languedoc. It's a huge appellation, but the best reds are kind of herb scented and juicy like this one.
Then another option we had was the Masse Conscience La Conscience 2020 from Terrasse du Larzac, another buzzy Languedoc appellation, and making some very serious reds like this one, which works really well. But my absolute favourite with the shepherd's pie, and specifically with the shepherd's pie, was the Clos d'Elpy LP Rouge 2021, which is an IGP Côte Catalan from Roussillon. It's pure peppery, intense, inky, fine-grained Syrah that is just fabulous with the meaty, rich duck flavours.
Yum, yum, yum. So this brings us on to our final course, which we've kept simple, as you've said. It's just Roquefort. Or is just Roquefort.
Roquefort.
That famously pungent, tangy, salty blue cheese that's made in the south of France. And what works best with stinky cheese?
Fortified sweet wine.
Yeah,
Ideally in our book, oxidatively aged fortified wine. So you get all those gorgeous flavours of dried fruits and nuts, as well as the sweetness that you need to match the intense saltiness of the cheese. You also need decent acidity in the wine to match a creamy cheese like this. So we've got a terrific pairing here. And it is the Domaine de Rancy Rivesaltes Ambré Vin du Naturel 1998. It is heavenly.
Yeah. I think I might just sink into that and forget everything else. Do you want to just carry on and finish all the pod? But no, seriously, I have to agree. I mean, wow, a stunning way to round off our food and wine adventure through the south of France. But before we end, there are a few things to say. Firstly, about Vin du Naturel, aren't they? These sweet fortified wines. Mostly from Roussillon, like Rivesaltes, Maury and Banyuls. Some are aged oxidatively. Some aren't. They come in all styles, especially if you include the various fortified muscats, which are also in Languedoc as well as Roussillon. And these are historic wines, aren't they?
Absolutely. As Matthew said, they're sort of thought to be some of the oldest fortified wines around. He points out there's evidence of fortifying wine going on in Montpellier in 1285, 4 centuries before it crops up in the Douro or Port. Anyway, they used to be huge back in the day. Now their popularity is in decline, but they do make a great match for cheese.
They do. It'd be such a shame if they get lost. So given we're in the Roussillon, I just wanted to bring Pauline back in here to say a few words about her region.
Roussillon is a very interesting area because we have, I think we have around us so many winemakers, young winemakers who are willing to take risks. They're not stuck by any laws of our appellation. I guess in Roussillon you have really outstanding wines for great value, and also like a lot of organic wines. And so you find an extremely wide range of very good and clean wines.
How do you see, Pauline, the future for Roussillon?
It's hard to say. Because of the weather, it's been 2 years now that we suffer from like very dry weather. So I think the Roussillon would have to go back on like indigenous grapes and more resilient grapes. The great thing about it is even with the struggle, you will always find good value for quality in Roussillon. We do have incredible products and incredible variety as well. For example, in our vineyard, we have 16 different products, but our neighbor probably has 20, and the neighbor after has 15 again. Like it's incredible. So the future for Roussillon is only going to be bright because we carry on, and I think we are all very resilient as like the grapes, I guess.
Now, interestingly, Pauline was telling me how they've taken out their old cement tanks to install stainless steel and modern high-tech kit like a nitrogen generator and a cross-flow filter. And that's so they can make wines like their low-sulfite cuvées, but also make their wines more expressive and fresh and clean generally, because that's what they feel is the future for the region.
Interesting. Now, we also asked Matthew Stubbs about how he sees the future for the Sud de France.
I see the future as good for this region because I think it's got a long history of adapting to change. It's a region that's had more than 2,000 years of history, but it only has really maybe 50 years of history of producing quality wine. So it takes time to build that reputation. I mean, particularly when you have a reputation for making, high volume of inexpensive wine. If I look at other regions around France, and I used to refer to the Languedoc-Roussillon as the next classic wine region of France. I don't say that anymore. I think it is already. the next classic region of France. I see no reason why we should not talk of this region in the same breath as Bordeaux, Rhone, or Burgundy. Yeah. To me, it has everything already. So that has already been a huge progression. So I think the future is very good. I think they're very well placed to deal with the climatic challenges. It's not going to be easy. It's tough in France at the moment with the decline in wine consumption in general, and also the decline in red wine in particular, which is having obviously an effect on a region like the Languedoc and Roussillon. But they're already adapting. They made the change from VDN to dry wines in areas like the Roussillon when the fortified wine sales suffered. Now they're making the move from red to white. That's not to say they won't carry on making red, they will. But I think the ability to change, adapt to change is very real in this region. So whatever challenges get thrown at them, they can deal with it. And that sort of kind of makes me very enthusiastic. And I think the future will be very good. Also, a huge amount of vineyard area has been taken out over the last 20 years. So what you're left with now is the really good stuff. Yeah? Now we've got the old vines. Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so exciting. Yeah. So, yeah, the quality's never been better. And it's only going to go one way, which is up.
He said he felt the region was on the verge of a real breakthrough, particularly with its whites. But he also flagged up the reds, particularly newer appellations like Terrasse du Larzac, but also older areas being revived like Corbière, whose wines he described as follows.
The wines are never really that polished, but they have so much character and personality, and they have soul, I think is the way I would describe it. There's just something about them that kind of hits you, and I really like that.
So there we have it, wines with soul. And that seems like a good note to recap on. So by way of closing summary, Occitanie has many wine treasures across all kinds of styles, from fizz to fortified via white, red and pink. Rarely are they short on personality, and they often offer outstanding value for money, as well as being a great match for food. Keep an eye on the whites, the further development of organic wines, the revival of ancestral grape varieties, and also new things like peewees and beyond.
Now, we've featured lots of wines in this episode. We'll put a full listing of those on our website show notes. As for the recipes for these delicious dishes, well, you're going to have to wait for that. Wait for the subscription options to kick in, because we're planning to offer recipes as a subscriber bonus. Meantime, you can salivate over our social media content or something like that, which will give you at least a glimpse of all of these wonderful, delicious creations.
Thanks to Matthew Stubbs, MW, Jean-Claude Masse and Pauline Nadal. Also to the Occitanie region for sponsoring this episode. We'll be honing in a bit more on southwest France in another episode soon, which we're very much looking forward to. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us. And until next time, cheers.